right then, let's get started on the new stuff. Article 2, Section 4. The very end of Article 2 on the executive branch. What does this part talk about? Jessica? Impeachment. Let's see what it says. Article 2, Section 4. Not that hard to understand. It's pretty easy to read. It says that the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States, that means anyone in our government, shall be removed from office, kicked out, on impeachment for and conviction of. There's a two-step process. To be removed from office, two things have to happen. You have to be impeached for something, and you have to be convicted of that something. All right, well, what are those somethings you can be impeached for? Well, they give a list, don't they? It's a pretty short list. You can be impeached for treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. So, treason, what's that? That's being a traitor to your own country, right? It means you're siding with an enemy of the United States. That would be a big deal, wouldn't it? If someone in our government, especially if the president, the commander-in-chief, was a traitor, guess what? We're not stuck with them. There is a way to get rid of them from the presidency. The Founding Fathers put it right in the Constitution. Good thing, right? We don't want a traitor running our country. Jet?
So if the president committed treason, it was like obvious, would they have to like go through all of like...
Doesn't matter how obvious it is, we have to follow the law and have to go through this process outlined in the Constitution. Good question. All right? That's treason. But that's not all, right? Another one is bribery. I think you know what bribery is, right? That's using your position of power in the government to do a favor or something for somebody else or a group of people in exchange for their support or their money or a campaign donation, whatever. Right? You're accepting bribes and using your government position to make people happy. That's not okay. All right? And if someone in our government does that, especially a president, we don't have to put up with that. There's a way to get rid of them. Founders built that right in the Constitution. So it's treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Whoa. This is weird. At first, the founders are very specific. They list the crime, treason and bribery. And then all of a sudden they get very general and vague. Or other high crimes. Well, that's not by accident. That's on purpose. The Founding Fathers wanted to say, definitely we're not stuck with government officials that are traitors or guilty of bribery. We can get rid of them. After that, whatever you consider a high enough crime to get rid of them, it's up to the people in charge of impeachment. That's what it says right there, doesn't it? Well, who is in charge of impeachment? Well, this is the third spot in the Constitution that mentions impeachment. So we got a review. Back in Article 1, you read, at least you were assigned to read, you read under the part about the House of Representatives, it says the House of Representatives has the sole power of impeachment. That means ain't nobody impeaching anybody except the House of Representatives. They're the only ones that can impeach. If there's any impeachment going to be done, they're the ones doing it. That's what sole power means. You can't impeach anyone, the President can't impeach, the Senate can't impeach anyone, the Supreme Court can't impeach anybody. Only the House of Representatives can do any impeaching. All right, and then it talked about impeachment again in Article 1 under the section that describes the Senate. It says that if someone is impeached by the House of Representatives, the Senate will put the impeached person on trial, an impeachment trial. And that's kind of weird in and of itself because the Senate is part of the legislative branch, not the judicial branch, but yet they hold a trial for an impeached person. Why? Because we're a nation of laws and that's what the Constitution says. All right, and in that trial, the Constitution says the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court will be the judge of the trial, and the jury will be the senators themselves. They will listen to the evidence. The House of Representatives will present the evidence to the senators. The senators will listen to it, and then at the end, they'll have a vote, guilty or not guilty. And according to the Constitution, it requires a 2/3 guilty vote for them to be punished. Now that would mean 67 out of 100, right? Have to say guilty, and if that happens, then the only punishment they can do is removal from office. In that case, the impeached person, president, whoever it is, will be kicked out. So, in our nation's history, we have had 3 presidents who have been impeached. When we get to those times in history, we'll tell the long story, but just because we're talking about impeachment today, I'll give you the short story for each one. The first time was in the 1860s. I remember that. No, I don't, I'm not that old. All right, the 1860s, it was President Andrew Johnson. He was the guy that took over when Kennedy was killed, by the way. And he had political enemies in Congress. They wanted him out, so they set him up. They passed a law. Congress passed a law that said presidents can't fire their cabinet members. Now we're going to learn in a little while that that's a ridiculous law because the president hires the cabinet. If he hires them, obviously he can fire them. Well, they passed a law that said presidents can't fire a cabinet member, and turns out one of his cabinet members was one siding with his political enemies. So President Johnson fired him. And they said, aha, gotcha. You did the high crime of firing a cabinet member. We're going to have to impeach you. And the House of Representatives impeached President Johnson. And then it went on trial in the Senate. And the Senate held the trial. And when it came time for the vote, they fell 1 vote short of a 2/3 majority for a guilty verdict. So he was considered not guilty. So he was impeached for, but not convicted of. So Johnson got to finish out the rest of that term. He was not removed from office. Followed the Constitution, right? All right, the next time, I do remember, it wasn't that long ago, it was 1998. That was President Bill Clinton. In his second term, the House of Representatives impeached him for the crimes of perjury and obstruction of justice. Perjury means you lie in court when you've sworn an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and then you lie. That's perjury. Obstruction of justice means you keep the authorities from finding out the evidence that you know. And his case, his obstruction of justice, was he got another witness to lie in court. So the House of Representatives impeached him for those 2 crimes, perjury, obstruction of justice. Then it went on trial of the Senate, and the Senate fell way short of the 2/3 guilty. So even though Bill Clinton was impeached for those crimes, he was not convicted of those crimes. So he did not get removed from office. He got to finish his term, right? The third time was just this year, December 2019, January 2020. The House of Representatives, like we said last week, is majority Democrats, right? They impeached President Trump for the crime of, here's where they ran into trouble. They said he was guilty of a crime because of a phone call to another country's leader. And they said during that phone call, he made promises, basically bribery. The United States would do things, give your country money if you did things to help me get reelected. All right, that would be a crime. So they impeached him. The problem they had was the very day after they announced they were going to impeach him, President Trump said, for what? And he released the transcript of the phone call. So instead of the Democrats being able to tell us what was said in the phone call, we could read it for ourselves. We could read it word for word. And it was clear that the president didn't commit any crimes in his conversation with that other world leader. But since they had already started the process, it would have been pretty embarrassing to admit, well, we lied to you, and stop the impeachment process. So they continued on with it with very flimsy evidence. And the House of Representatives impeached Donald Trump, and then it went, like the Constitution says, to a trial in the Senate, and the Senate came back not guilty. So President Trump gets to finish his term, which is what he's doing right now, right? So he was impeached for, but not convicted of any crimes. So, what's unique about President Trump is it was his first term, and in 22 days, he might get elected to a second term, right? And that would be historic. He'd be the first impeached president to be re-elected. So we'll wait and see. That's up to we the people, right? So, 3 times in American history, there have been other officials impeached and removed, but only 3 times have a president been impeached, and all 3 times they were not convicted by the Senate. So all 3 times they got to finish out their term. Any questions on impeachment? If you understand all that, what we've discussed, you know more about impeachment than most Americans. Many Americans think impeachment means you get kicked out. Sorry, that's just not true. That's only part of the process, right? You have to be impeached for and convicted of a crime. We've had 3 presidents impeached. None of them were convicted, so none of them got kicked out. Any questions on impeachment? Any questions at all on Article 2 in the presidency? No one is above the law, not even the president or a nation of laws. So they commit crimes, we have a system in place to take care of that. All right, let's move on to Article 3. I know you haven't read it yet, that's tonight's assignment, but we're going to get into it anyway. What building is this? This is the center of the big drama unfolding right this very minute in our country today. What's happening this week? I don't mean in 22 days. Obviously, that'll be in the next history book, right? I'm talking about what happens this week will be a chapter in the next history book. An unfolding drama right before our eyes. So what building is this? Anybody? Any Americans in here? Yeah. That is the United States Supreme Court building. United States Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, right? Supreme, that's what it means, the highest court in the land. They are the top of what branch of government? It's Article 3 about. Chrissy? The judicial branch. What's their job? Congress makes the laws. The president enforces the laws. What's the Supreme Court do?
Interpret.
They interpret the law. Remember what that means? Sometimes there's a dispute of how does the law apply to this situation? I think it's on my side, you think it's on your side. Well, who gets to sort all that out? Who gets to interpret what the law says? That's the judicial branch. All right, they might interpret a law made in Fort Myers, or a Florida law, or a law made by Congress, or they might interpret the Constitution. That's their job. All right, up these famous steps, through those famous thick wooden doors, is the courtroom. And up on the bench, there's multiple seats. All right, because there's not one judge, there's several judges on the Supreme Court. We'll get into that in a minute. But before we get into that, Supreme, highest court in the land, their decisions are final, done, settled, it's over. There's nobody else to ask. All right, what we mean by that is we're going to use Jet today. Let's say that Jet has been accused of a crime. And he has a trial, and the government brings evidence, and the jury says he's guilty. And he's sentenced to 25 years in prison. Now, he obviously doesn't like that outcome, does he? But I think you watch enough TV and movies and stuff to know that he could appeal to another court, a higher court, right? Well, guess what? He can't appeal just because he doesn't like the outcome. Too bad, so sad, deal with it. But he can appeal if he or his lawyers think that the lower court didn't follow the law. Somehow the lower court didn't follow the law, which means they violated his constitutional rights. He has a chance to appeal to a higher court. And in the higher court, they don't give him a new trial. They'll just look at what the lower court did. And they'll figure out, yeah, they followed the law just fine. Too bad, Jet. Deal with it. Or they might agree with Jet and his lawyers and say, you know what? You're right. They violated your rights. You get a whole new fresh trial, or we're going to throw out your conviction, or whatever they decide. All right, well, there's several layers. It's like a ladder of courts in our country. And at the very, very top is the United States Supreme Court. They're the highest court in the land. And they listen to several cases every year. Not everybody that wants their case to go before the Supreme Court gets their way. Jet might want the Supreme Court to decide his case, but they may not agree. It's up to them. They only listen to a handful a year, cases that they think will have an impact on a lot of Americans. So let's say he does get his case all the way to the Supreme Court. They're not going to give him a new trial. They're not going to listen to all that evidence. That's not their job. They're just going to look what the lower courts did. And they'll either say, the lower courts followed the law just fine. Your verdict was a fair verdict. Go to prison. Or they might side with Jet and say, you know what? Your rights were violated. You either have that conviction removed, or you get a whole new fresh trial, or whatever. And then once they make their decision, that's it. Is there anybody else to appeal it to? Nope. That's what highest court in the land means. That's what supreme means. Their decision is final. It is over. It's done. It's settled. There is nobody else to ask. Are you starting to understand that it kind of matters who those judges are on that court, doesn't it? Because their decisions last how long? Forever. Their decisions, this is what you need to know. I don't mean for your tests and quizzes. This is what you need to know as an American. Their decisions have an enormous impact on your everyday life. Because their decisions are final, and you have to live with them. And your children have to live with those decisions, and your grandchildren have to live with those decisions. And long after the judges that made that decision are off the court, they're all dead and gone. And there's a whole new set of judges. Guess what? The decisions they made in the past are still in effect. Are you starting to see that it matters a lot who's on that court? That's an important position. All right, well, here you go. Here's who it is. This is the most recent photograph of the current judges on the Supreme Court. But once they get on the Supreme Court, we do not call them judges anymore. We call them justices. All right, so as if to distinguish, they're still judges, but we call them justices, and that lets everybody know they're on the highest court. They're justices on the United States Supreme Court. There's, count them, there's 9 of them. Now, it doesn't say in the Constitution, Article 3, that there has to be 9. It even says in Article 1 and Article 3 that Congress gets to decide the number of judges, but for the last 150, 180, whatever years, we've set the number at 9. Seems to be working pretty good. We don't want one person to decide those cases, right? So we have 9 judges. And here's the thing, when they, by the way, there's one that's called the Chief Justice. He always gets to sit in the middle in the yearly photo. That's Chief Justice John Roberts. The other 8 are called Associate Justices. But when they rule on a case, they'll listen to both sides' argument, and they'll make their own personal decision, and they'll vote. And here's the thing you need to know. It doesn't matter if it's 9-0, 8-1, 7-2, 6-3, or 5-4. Doesn't matter. Their decision is final. A 5-4 decision is just as binding as a 9-0 decision. It's all the same. You got that? So, next question. question is, how do you get on the Supreme Court? I mean, the House of Representatives, people of their district elect them. Senators, people of their state elect them. President, Electoral College elects them. How does someone get on the Supreme Court? I know you haven't read it, but I'll give you a clue. Nobody elects them. How do they get there? The president appoints them. You'll find that out tonight when you read. The president appoints them. In fact, Article 2 under the executive branch, it says in the Constitution, we are a nation of laws, that the president shall appoint judges to the Supreme Court. Not that he may, they shall. All right, it also, next question, how long do they get to stay on the court? Remember, the House is 2 years, but there's no limit to their term. Senate 6 years, but no limits. President's 4 years, but they are limited to 2 terms. How about a Supreme Court justice? I'll give you a hint. There's no term. So how long do they get to stay on the court?
They serve as long as they serve responsibly.
Yeah, it's a lifetime appointment. They get to stay on the court until they die or retire. Right, and both happen from time to time, right? Which means that presidents, when they become president, they don't just get to put people on the court automatically. There has to be an opening. If somebody dies or retires, then the president appoints their replacement. But the Constitution also says that the president gets to pick the person. But that person doesn't get to go to the court and fill the empty seat until the Senate has their final say. The Senate will examine the person's qualifications, make sure the president just didn't pick his cousin Billy Bob or somebody, and they will have a final vote, yes or no. All right, so the Senate doesn't get to name the person. That's up to the president. The president doesn't just get to force them on the court. The Senate gets a say. All right, and that's what the law says, and that's what we've been doing ever since our nation was started. All of these people have been appointed by a president and confirmed by the Senate. Separation of powers, checks and balances, right? Christy? Have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. So those people are all like been chosen by different presidents?
Yeah, it all depends. So here we go. Some recent history. George W. Bush, 2 presidents ago, was president for 8 years, and he got to make 2 picks. Only 2 openings his whole 8 years. He picked Chief Justice John Roberts. I call him a shaky pick. He picked Justice Samuel Alito. I call him a solid pick. All right. Next president was Barack Obama, president for 8 years. All right. He only got to make 2 picks also the whole 8 years because they're the only openings that came up. He appointed Sonia Sotomayor, lousy pick. Elena Kagan, lousy pick. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. All right, President Trump has been president for a little less than 4 years, right? 3+ years. He's already made 3 picks. So again, Bush 8 years, 2 picks. Obama 8 years, 2 picks. Trump 4 years, 3 picks. Is that unconstitutional? No. He was president when there were 3 openings. So he has appointed in his first year Neil Gorsuch, solid pick. Brett Kavanaugh, you might remember him from October 2 years ago, 2018, and the ugly confirmation hearing he went through, and the awful things he was accused of. But now he's on the court for how long? Lifetime appointment. All right, and as you know, because we mentioned it before, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a month ago or whatever, died, right? So now there's an opening. The Constitution says the president shall appoint someone. So he has. He did his constitutional duty. And he picked this lady right here. Her name is Amy Coney Barrett. She is currently a federal judge in Indiana. That's a pretty high court, but it's not the Supreme Court. And now Trump has picked her for Supreme Court. I wished that's who he picked when Kavanaugh's spot came open. But he picked Kavanaugh because he's president and I'm not. All right, but he made a promise. He said he's saving Amy Coney Barrett for if and when Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies or retires. Well, she did. And he kept his promise. One of the things I like about Trump is he keeps promises. All right, so he picked Amy Coney Barrett this time. All right, so she happens to be a mother wife and mother with a large family. She has 7 kids. 2 of them are adopted, I think, from Haiti. Her youngest son has Down syndrome. So that previous photo was from a couple weeks ago when President Trump made the announcement official at the White House. Her family was there that day. And when it was all over, the ceremony was over, they all went up with the president, had their picture taken, except the little fella. I was watching the video. They were all going up, and he yanked his hand away from his big sister and went and sat down with his babysitter. He wasn't in the mood to have his picture taken, I guess. So he won't be in that famous photograph. Gussie,
What's Down syndrome?
means he's
Really?
mentally handicapped.
Oh, I didn't recognize the term.
All right, so
I know what that's.
I'll go through all of them. Stephen Breyer, thumbs down. Clarence Thomas, my favorite, solid judge. John Roberts, shaky. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, tyrant in a black robe. Samuel Alito, solid pick. Neil Gorsuch, solid. Sonia Mayor, Kagan, Kavanaugh. Here's what I mean by that. What is a judge supposed to do at any level, especially the Supreme Court? What are they supposed to do? What's their function? Interpret the law. Which basically means follow the law as it's written, right? Here's a dirty little secret I need to tell you. It's my job to teach you what the Constitution says and how it's supposed to work. Regrettably, I have to tell you what has really happened throughout history. Some of these judges, instead of doing that, interpreting the law, they decide to make new laws or to change laws. Is that their job? No. Most important part of the lesson. Forget what you get in for a grade in history class. Make sure you understand this. We cannot have that happen. We cannot have judges making and changing laws to what they think is right. There are some of these judges, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who would clearly say, I know what the law says, but I think it should say this. So I'm going to rule this way. There's a word for that. That's a tyrant. When one person thinks they know best and they overrule Congress, they overrule the president who signed it into law, they overrule we the people who elected them because they think they know best. That's King George III. That's a dictator. That's a tyrant. They just happen to have a black robe. Their job is not to make laws. Whose job is it to make laws? Come on, you know this. Whose job is it to make laws? Congress's job. Now, let me ask you this. If Congress makes a stupid law that we don't like, what can we do? What's never more than 2 years away? An election. So if they make stupid laws that we don't like, next election, we can fire those who voted for that stupid law and hire new ones. And tell the new ones, change that stupid law we don't like. Now, I can't do that as an individual, but we the people collectively sure can, can't we? In other words, we have a recourse. When Congress makes laws we don't like, we have a recourse. There's something we can do about it. When these people start making laws, is there anything we can do about it? No, because we didn't elect them, did we? Their term's never going to be up. And when they make decisions, remember, that's forever. That's why elections matter. That's why it matters who the president is. That's why it matters who's on the Senate. Because presidents get to pick these people. And the Senate gets to confirm these people, and they get to stay until they die. And the decisions they make are final. Listen to this. The president cannot change a Supreme Court decision. Congress cannot change a Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court themselves cannot change a Supreme Court decision. Once they make it, they can't change their mind. And we the people cannot change a Supreme Court decision. They're final. So let me give you a example in history. The infamous decision of 1973, about 50 years ago, Roe versus Wade. That's an infamous decision. Everybody in America knows that was a shaky legal decision. Here's what the Supreme Court said. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was a 6-3 decision. So 6 judges on the Supreme Court in 1973 said it is okay for one person to kill another person as long as they do it before they're born. Now, you have read the Constitution. They interpreted the Constitution. That's what they did. They interpreted the Constitution and said that's what it says. Now, you've read the Constitution, at least part of it. You gotten that part yet? Now, I'm going to sign the whole thing. You'll never see that part. Obviously, that's not in the Constitution. Our founders did say it's okay for one person to kill another person as long as you do it before that person gets born. That's called abortion, right? That's just a form of murder. Our founding fathers didn't put that in the Constitution. So what were they thinking in the Supreme Court in 1963? Believe it or not, it's not that hard to understand. I can explain it to you. This is how they interpreted it. The Constitution does say that you have a right to privacy. And remember, the Constitution protects us from government tyranny. The government has no business prying into your private life. Can the government come into your house anytime they want? No, they cannot. That's your private place. They have to have a search warrant. When we get to the Bill of Rights, that ain't easy to get. We'll talk about how hard it is for them to get a search warrant. They can't stop and talk to you, pull you over, detain you, and ain't for no reason. Walking down the street or driving down the road, they have to have a good reason to do that. Because you have a right to privacy. Go about your business without government interference. They can't spy on you, listen in on your phone calls, read your emails, see what websites you're visiting. It's none of their business. You have a right to privacy, don't you? That's one of the great things about being an American. We're free from government tyranny. So they reasoned this way. They said, since we have a right to privacy, what could be more private than our own body? So on a woman in her reproductive system, if she is pregnant, it is not up to the government to tell her that she can't end that pregnancy. She has a right to privacy. What she does with her body is her business, not the government's business. And that was the Roe v. Wade decision. And they said that from here on out, no town like Fort Myers, no state like Florida, or any other state or anywhere can ever make abortion illegal. It became legal on demand. Now, since that time, approximately, give or take, 60 million babies have been killed through abortion. 60 million. Now, I know you have learned enough about history to know about the Holocaust, the horror of the Holocaust in World War II, when Hitler and evil Nazi Germany systematically murdered 6 million Jews and other undesirables, as the racist Adolf Hitler saw it, right? Murdered 6 million. And we have museums dedicated so that we would never forget that happened in history and never let anything like that happen again. The horror of the Holocaust. Don't get me wrong, I'm not discounting that horror. That is horrible. We need those museums. We need to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. That's the danger of tyranny, right? So we have to make sure. But let's do the math. That was 6 million. Our Holocaust in America is 60 million. 10 times as bad. And the victims are the most helpless and innocent. Tiny unborn babies. And you know what? That didn't happen in Nazi Germany. That happened in one nation under God. And it's still happening. All right, that was a decision made in 1973 by the Supreme Court. That decision's final, isn't it? It's final. We can't change it. We the people. President can't change it no matter who we elect. Congress can't change it no matter what party's in control. The Supreme Court themselves can't go back and change Roe v. Wade. It's final. It's done. It's settled. Now I'm gonna tell you something, there is one way. A Supreme Court decision can be changed. That's what you need to know as an American, there is one way, and that's why everybody is fighting for things. This big argument in our country, it's not about police brutality, it's not black and white, it's not Trump and Biden, it's not Republican and Democrat. I'm gonna tell you at the root, at the foundation, the big division in America is about good and evil. It's about abortion. That's what it's all about. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. At the root of it, you boil everything else away, all the other noise, that's what it's about. And there is a way that 1973 Roe v. Wade decision can be changed. And here it is. That's for a brand new case to come before the Supreme Court. They're never gonna revisit Roe v. Wade. That's settled. But a brand new case about the same topic. So in our example, that would be an abortion case comes before the court, they could make a new ruling that overturns a previous ruling. And then that decision would be final. And here's an example of how that happened. We'll learn about it as we get to it. In the 1890s, another infamous stupid decision by our Supreme Court. There was a black man who wanted to ride in the passenger cars for whites only on a train. He got arrested. And he appealed his case, and his case eventually went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled with the government. They said, sorry, mister, the government did nothing wrong by arresting you for that. It's okay for businesses and everybody to have separate facilities for black citizens and white citizens. That's called segregation. And from the 1890s up into the 1950s, that's how our country was. And then in 1954, a whole new Supreme Court. Not the same 9 that was on the court in the 1890s, is it? A whole new set of 9 judges on the Supreme Court made a new ruling on segregation. This one's called the famous Brown versus Board of Education. And they ruled that segregation is unconstitutional and that we had to desegregate schools. It was about schools. They said you can't send schools or students to schools based on the color of their skin. A citizen is a citizen, and you need to be able to go to whatever school regardless of your skin color. Brown versus Board of Education ruled segregation unconstitutional. In other words, they overruled the 1890s decision like 60 years later. Guess what? That's what Republicans, who by and large are pro-life, are hoping will happen with the Roe v. Wade decision. That's what Democrats, who by and large are pro-abortion, obviously there's individual differences, but that's what the parties stand for. That's what Democrats are scared to death will happen. That Roe v. Wade will be overturned. I think it will be. I'm hoping it happens in my lifetime. I'm pretty sure it will happen in your lifetime. The reason I think that is because everybody understands, Republicans and Democrats, old people and 8th graders can understand that Roe v. Wade was decided on very shaky law. Yeah, we explained it, right? A woman has a right to do what she wants with her body. But what did those judges obviously miss? Government can't tell you what to do with your body.
It's not her body.
Yeah, the baby is not her body. The baby is a separate somebody. Don't believe me? Are you the same person as your mom? No, you are a separate person with rights. Just because the baby is inside the mother, it is not the mother's body. She can do what she wants with her body, but she can't end the life of another body just because it's inconvenient. Newsflash, there are days when your teachers think 8th graders are inconvenient. That doesn't mean we can end your life. Right? And I'm pretty sure there are days where 8th graders think history teachers are pretty inconvenient. That doesn't mean you get to kill me. Right? Government can't tell you what to do with your body, but it can doggone sure make sure you don't violate other bodies' rights, right? It's a free country, I can swing my arms around all I want. I can't swing my arm around and hit Christian in the side of the head. He has rights too. My rights stop when I violate his rights. The mother's right to her body stops when she violates her unborn baby's right to life, which, by the way, we mentioned in our Declaration of Independence, the very document that gave birth to our country, when we said we have God-given, inalienable rights, and among them are the right to life. So everybody agrees, Republicans, Democrats, Roe v. Wade is kinda shaky. I'm not talking about the biblical argument. You wanna have the biblical argument? Pro-life wins every day, no brainer. I'm not talking about the scientific argument. You wanna have the scientific argument? Pro-life wins every day, no brainer. Life doesn't start when you're born. You're alive long before that. That's science. Always makes me laugh when Democrats are saying, we're all about science when it comes to coronavirus or climate change. But when it comes to abortion, they ignore it. Right? I'm not talking about those arguments. Pro-life wins those every day. I'm just talking about the legal argument, the constitutional argument. Everybody has rights, even unborn people. So again, everybody knows. You don't believe me that Democrats know? Read Planned Parenthood's website. There's a link to an article. Planned Parenthood, by the way, is the #1 baby killing company in America. They call themselves abortion providers, but that's what they do. They kill babies for profit. All right? Holocaust of 60 million, right, of the most innocent, for even a worse reason than racism. The profit, the greed of profit is why we've done it in America, one nation under God. On Planned Parenthood's website, there's a link to an article, and they are scared to death that someday Roe v. Wade will be overturned by the Supreme Court. Why are they so afraid? Because they know it was a shaky decision. It overlooked the rights of the baby. All right, so for my whole lifetime, now there's a long time, that's 6 decades. All right, my whole lifetime. Put it this way, much of my lifetime, this is the way it was on the Supreme Court. We had 6 tyrants in black robes making up the law as they go, regardless of what the Constitution says. That explains how they said it's okay. The Constitution says you kill babies. All right, that's how it was, 6-3. And things got a little better as the years went by. Eventually it ended up like this, 5-4. Tyrants versus judges on the Supreme Court. Telling you, the real. Not what the Constitution says we're supposed to do, but what was actually happening. I always hate having to tell 8th graders that, because I love the Constitution, but you gotta know what's going on. Alright, and then, for a long time, in recent history, it got this way. It was a balanced court. 4 tyrants, 4 judges, and 1 question mark. That was Kennedy, who was eventually replaced by Gorsuch, who's not on this picture. So we always knew 4 judges are always going to do what they think is right, because they're tyrants in black robes. And 4 were always going to follow the law, no matter what they personally thought was not right. That's why I love Clarence Thomas so much. He will tell you, it doesn't matter what my opinion is, what I feel about this law, whether it's a good law or a bad law. That doesn't matter. I have to follow the law the way it's written. That's what makes him a hero. He knows his personal opinion on how things should be is meaningless. We didn't elect him to make laws. Right? We elect Congress to do that. His job is to make sure it's interpreted the way it was written. That's why he's my hero. Alright? So this is the way it was for a long time. But then, Anthony Kennedy retired, President Trump appointed Gorsuch, and you think, good, right? Finally, 5-4. Not so fast. I'm giving you recent history here. All of a sudden, when that happened, Chief Justice John Roberts, remember I told you he's shaky? He became the new question mark. On many cases, he tends to lean right. On 5-4 decisions, which there's a lot of them, he'll vote the right way. But on some pretty big ones, he's voted with the tyrants. So we're like, here we go again, we're back to this. All right, and then Kavanaugh replaced a good one. All right, a good judge. All right, so it's still 4-1. Who's that? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? A month or whatever so ago. She died. There's an opening. President Trump did his job, right? He appointed a new justice, Amy Coney Barrett. Her whole career as a judge, we don't know what she'll be as a Supreme Court justice, but her whole career as a judge, she's been very much about sticking to the letter of the law, not imposing her own personal beliefs, but following what the law says. So if that's the case, and if the Senate does confirm her, which it looks like they will because Republicans have a 53-47 majority, right? Then look what will happen. For the first time in my whole lifetime, it'll be a clear, according to the law, Supreme Court, for the first time in my whole life. Maybe even 6-3, right? Because once he doesn't have to be the big decider, maybe he'll be a 6-3, but even if he doesn't, it's still 5-4, right? And if Trump wins again, by the way, how did he get elected the first time? Why, this American and tens of millions of other Americans voted for him for one reason. Because he promised, if I ever become president, I will only appoint to the Supreme Court judges that interpret the law. They stick to the law. Regardless of what I as president might think, regardless of what you as a citizen might think, we need to interpret the law, not make it. He promised that. So me and tens of millions of others voted for him, despite the fact that he's arrogant and vulgar. It's good enough for me, if he's gonna appoint these kind of judges. And then we also made sure the Republicans had the majority in the Senate, so the good judges he appointed would get confirmed. Alright, so we are following the Constitution. She did. There's an opening. He appointed Barrett. If they put her on, it'll be for the first time ever in anybody's living memory, the Supreme Court will be clearly following law instead of making it up. And that's important, because we are a nation of laws. And we can't have them making up laws like they've been for generations, because we have no recourse. We can't vote them out. And she's 48. And she gets to stay for her life. So let's say she lives till 70. That's 30 years of decisions from Amy Coney Barrett, right? And if she's with the majority, makes a big difference. That has an enormous impact on your everyday life, your children's, your grandchildren's. So, anybody you ever hear say, I don't vote, elections don't matter, they're all the same. Wrong. Those people are the problem. That's why we're in danger of losing our freedoms. You better believe it, elections matter. Because whoever's president gets to pick these people. Right? And whoever's the majority in the Senate gets to say yes or no. Elections matter. Right now, while we speak, Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearings are taking place, as they will the rest of this week. That's what I mean by, that's the chapter American history is writing this week. Whether we're going to change that balance of the court for the foreseeable future or not. Now, the Democrats are coming unglued. They're saying this is unconstitutional. No, it's not. There's an opening. The president did his job. He made his pick. Right? They're saying, well, we should let the people decide. There's an election in 22 days. We should let the people decide. We did. That was called the 2016 election. That's why people like me voted for him. The Senate's 53-47 Republican. We did vote in 2018 to make it that way. The people did speak. Right? If there's any openings after the next president, whether it's Trump or Biden, well then whoever's president then can fill those openings. That will be constitutional. But in the meantime, we're following the Constitution. You can cry unconstitutional all you want, but we're following it to the letter. So don't let anyone confuse you on that. Why are they so upset? What are they afraid of? Another abortion case can come before the court, and Roe v. Wade could be overturned. And maybe we could finally end that holocaust of murdering innocent Americans because they're inconvenient And because some black tyrants in robes nearly 50 years ago said the Constitution said that's okay. Any questions on the Supreme Court? We're gonna see that drama unfold this week. It's either will or won't be the judge to take the place. Either that's how it'll look, or the Senate will reject her. Either way, we will have followed the Constitution. Science on board. Read it for yourself. Article 3.